I couldn't help but notice that you've clicked on and are presently listening to an episode of the Paranormal Patio podcast. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your support. And if you want to continue to support us, the best thing you can do is share our episodes on social media. That's right. You can tag us in everything. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find us on paranormalpatio.com, where you'll find articles, links to information from our past guests, as well as, every episode as it comes out. Also, head on over to Patreon. Patreon.com/BeyondThePatio. You can get a monthly live stream, at least one. Sometimes we do more. Exclusive bonus content, early access to all of our episodes. And starting with Season 3, I've got to move Season 1 to the archives. So they'll be on Patreon as well, and you can listen to them there. Thanks again for your support. And hey, let's get into the episode. What kind of weird thing are we talking about today?
You're listening to the Paranormal Patio Podcast.
Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, I'm Jason, and this episode is a special episode. You just get me. That's right, no guest tonight. I'm here to talk about a recent investigation that I did with my friend Levi Martin at a cemetery that is a special place it's becoming, I think. And I wanted to play some audio evidence that we got during our investigation and talk about everything a little bit. If you are a member of the Beyond the Patio Patreon, you got to experience this investigation live with us a couple weeks ago. And we do things like this all the time. So if you're not a member yet and you're interested, come on over. There's plenty of room in the patio for you. And if not, hey, you can sit beyond the patio. This place that we visited is a very old local cemetery that my friend Keith put me onto when we were talking about a Bigfoot experience that he had. And you're thinking already, Bigfoot cemetery, what gives? Okay, so this place is full of mystery. To begin with, driving to it is one of those roads where the trees kind of make an arch across the entire length of the road. You feel like you're being transported into some mysterious and magical land, I guess. The cemetery itself is incredibly rural, really isolated. There are a few houses to the east of the cemetery, but none close by. It also sits less than a mile, I think, from a river here. This river is the site of Keith's first Bigfoot encounter that was actually about 5 miles-ish away on the opposite side of the river. But this whole area, it turns out, is kind of known locally as Bigfoot hotspot. And so when I reached out to Levi for the live stream investigation, I had presented it as, hey, we're going to go out here and look for Bigfoot. Levi's really into all the Bigfoot hunting shows and everything, and I thought this would be a lot of fun. We can go out, maybe we'll hear something. Because when I went with my friend Keith initially back in the summer, we heard some pretty big noises and some breathing and some weird stuff, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what Levi and I actually captured as evidence that night was not Bigfoot related at all, really. If you've been listening to the show this season, you know that I've been kind of operating on this new theory of all of these different types of experiences, whether they're ghosts or cryptids or UFOs, alien contact even. I think that it's all the same thing. I think we're experiencing a different aspect of the same energy. I think it varies based on a lot of different variables that I and no one really, I don't think, could be sure of. So that's an ongoing research item for me this year. But I have a feeling that this place is also going to be an ongoing research item this year and beyond. So let's get into it a little bit. Like I said, my friend Keith and I went out back in, I think it was in August. I can't be for sure. I mean, I could go back and look and see, but it's not really important. We went in the summer. when Keith and I went out, the first thing that we did was kind of just walk the cemetery. There was still a little sunlight, so we had, pretty good vision to see what was going on. And the weird thing immediately that I noticed is at the back of the cemetery is this ring of black fungus of some sort. I couldn't help but draw parallels to the famous fairy rings of, Irish folklore. The fae, the fairies. And that's another key piece to this puzzle and this theory of everything being the same. I had intended to do a little candle ceremony, which I did, and I thought, let's do it in the middle of this fairy ring, right? Because why wouldn't I? We had these candles going the entire time we were there, and it was safe. Everything was safe. We weren't going to start a fire or anything like that. And Keith and I walked around. We had an EMF meter. I don't believe it hit at all. We heard some big crashes between the cemetery and the river. I mean, big, kind of sounded like an elephant falling out of a tree. Bigger than a person falling. So I don't think it was a person. And we don't have any big animals in the wild. I mean, we have deer that can get pretty big here, but it didn't run. A deer wouldn't just make one big sound and stay there. So while we're listening to that, and Keith's eyes are really, really wide because, he had a really terrifying Bigfoot encounter, which you can hear about in episode 1 of season 3, right here on Paranormal Patio. We're listening to that, and we can hear what sounds like breathing coming from the west of us on the edge of the woods. We didn't see anything. As the investigation with Keith went on a little while, we decided this is an old cemetery with graves that go back to before the Civil War, that we would play a Civil War tune on my phone and, just see if we could drag up anything else. If there was any sort of ghost activity in this cemetery, maybe this will trigger something. And we had an audio recorder going. We played a song. Right after we played the song, which was Hell on the Wabash, because we live near the Wabash River, so we just kind of rolled with it. There was this light in the sky that was flying really fast, and we both noticed it. I pulled up an air traffic map radar thing on my phone, which I always have just in case if I see a light in the sky. I want to know, is that an airplane or is that something I need to really look at? And I pull it up. This light's still zooming over our heads. It's past dusk at this point. I look on the screen on my phone, and there are no airplanes flying in the direction that this light is flying. It was flying north. About 45 miles northwest of us, there was an airplane that was flying south. That was it. So, what was it? I don't know. By the time I told Keith that there were no airplanes, he said, "Hey, it flashed. Hey, it's gone." So in a matter of about 40 seconds, this thing shot over us, flashed, disappeared. No idea what it was. Other than the big sounds, that was really about all we had out there. And then we can flash forward to a few weeks ago, and like I had mentioned, Levi and I had went out, and his daughter, which was great. We had a fun time. I wish we could have had a little bit more time, but things are what they are. Like I mentioned, we're going out there with the intent of trying to hear more of these Bigfoot sounds or these big crashes in the woods. We didn't get any, and we had a few things happen. About 3 minutes after we were there, we heard this weird sort of howl sound. Again, we had the audio recorder going and the EMF meter going. We heard it. I don't know if it came through on the live stream or not. I don't think it did. I'd have to go back and watch it again. I'm pretty sure it did not. But we both reacted to it, and so I knew the audio recorder would at least mark where we heard it, and we could listen to the audio recorder. So we hear this weird howl sound. And then we also heard a very quick metallic or glass clink sound. It really sounded like an icicle snapping off, but there were no icicles. It had snowed, but there was no ice. It snowed the day before, and absolutely zero ice, especially an icicle that would be big enough to hear. It sounded roughly in the area where we heard the breathing with Keith. The icicle sound did not come up on the audio recorder. We poked around for a little while. I mean, we had a good time, but we kind of left feeling like, well, nothing happened. We didn't really catch anything. That was until After the live stream had ended and I had warmed up, I busted out the audio recorder. And we had actually experienced a few things that were very, very interesting. And one thing that has finally happened to me personally that had never happened to me before. And that was an actual captured disembodied voice, an EVP, on an audio recorder. I'm not much of a ghost hunter. Again, that's not really what I was going out there for. But this area really seems to be one of these spots where everything kind of happens. Bigfoot sounds, fairy ring, a UFO, an EVP. Oh yeah, and I didn't even mention that it's known locally as a place where there are free-floating balls of light. So I did see one of those when I was out with Keith as well. It looked like a flashlight, like a really cheap flashlight, like sort of dull orange color, moving from the edge of the woods towards my car. So when we ran over to my car, it was gone. I really thought it was a person with a flashlight, but there was no one there. I started looking into the cemetery to see if I could find any information on it. I cannot. The oldest grave that's listed on Find a Grave is from 1855, and it's actually my birthday, August 7th, 1855. So that's kind of weird. I just saw that now. So, and it goes all the way to modern times. I think the newest is actually from last year. This is a long-used cemetery. I can't say for sure that any of the folks that are buried there fought in the Civil War. They were certainly around during the time. There are several veterans from the Vietnam War there. They're all marked with little placards. And I have seen that there is at least one Freemason buried there. Now, depending on when the grave of this Freemason was made, it would dictate the sort of Freemasonry that they were involved in. As we all know, modern times, modern Freemasonry is largely just known as kind of a place for people to get together and do charitable work. They do a lot of commendable work. I'm friends with a lot of people who are Freemasons. They do a lot of good for the community. There is the older, darker side of Freemasonry, maybe not darker, but mysterious, right? Depending on when this Mason was buried and when he passed away, it could have been something occultish, in his life. Maybe not. But the fact remains, there is a Mason buried there. I dug into this looking for any, like I said, any history that I could find. I can't really find any. So if the first grave was from 1855, I guess that's the first marked grave. It doesn't mean it was the first person that was buried there. I'm not really sure. I found an investigation from a paranormal group. They have a little bit of a write-up, and this is where I found the note about a Mason being on the property. They don't know much about it either, and they worked with a local ghost hunting group when they visited. If they knew about it, that it would have been conveyed. So there's not much information about this cemetery at all. But the notes from this other ghost hunting group I found incredibly interesting. Balls of light have been seen at night floating through the cemetery. The center of the cemetery seems to be the most active, near a large cedar tree. Bigfoot sightings have occurred here, and locals call the alleged beast she-ape. Weird sounds have been heard at night, and it's not very far from running water. Incredibly interesting. I didn't see this before. So the fact that they mention the she-ape, as they call it, this Bigfoot, lines up directly with the Bigfoot encounter that Keith had. And I haven't even talked to Keith about this yet. So that's interesting. They go on to talk about who all was there and the equipment that they were using and the evidence that they collected. The evidence that they collected does not really line up with anything that I have experienced or collected. I think it just lends to the credibility that there's a lot of different activity that goes on here. The conclusion from this write-up says this was an interesting place off the beaten path. There were reports of strange lights and Bigfoot activity. It would have been better to investigate this at night. Almost all of the strange phenomena happened after the sun went down. However, it was a place to scope out for a future trip at night. A lot of names came through our real-time devices, such as Peggy, Layla, Elsie, which are older names, as well as Bob, Ed, and perhaps Abe Lincoln. The word growl came through, and I find that a bit interesting due to the possible cryptid activity here. So this investigation actually happened in 2020, August 29th, 2020, which if I go back and look to see, it'd be interesting to see if Keith and I were out there on August 29th, a year later. Very interesting. I found a quote from John Keel that I thought would resonate well with this story. The most fearsome monsters of all may inhabit the dark corners of our mind, waiting for us to release them through our beliefs and gullibility. The phenomenon feeds on fear and belief. Sometimes it destroys us altogether. Other times, it leads us upwards into the labyrinth of electromagnetic frequencies that form a curtain in the area we call windows, and stalks us to drink our blood and create all kinds of mischievous beliefs and misconceptions in our feeble little terrestrial minds. I think this area is a curtain, a window. I think there are a lot of different things that have happened here that cannot be easily written off, and I'm very interested in going back, and I will be going back for sure, and you guys will be the first people to know what I find. So I wanted to go over the evidence that we collected, and I will cut those into this little monologue, I guess, that I've had going here. The first thing I wanted to check, and in fact the first thing that shows up, is that howl sound that Levi and his daughter and I heard as soon as, 3 minutes after we got there. Basically as soon as we got there. I expected to hear something in the realm of a howl. I figured it was maybe a dog or a coyote, and we could pick that up and decipher, that that's what it was. However, what I found was actually a lot creepier than that. We all heard, audibly, with our ears and our physical bodies, we heard a short howl, like a whomp. It didn't sound like that at all, but that's the length of it, like a less than a second, just a blip. Now what you're about to hear is the audio that we captured from that timestamp. Let's take a listen.
What was that?
It was a howl. I don't know if it was a coyote.
What was that?
It was a howl. I don't know if it was a coyote.
What was that?
It was a howl. I don't know if it was a coyote.
Now to me it sounds like there is a tune being whistled on the recorder. It's really interesting because we did not hear whistling at all. And it definitely sounds like a whistle. And this is the exact time when we heard the howl with our ears. I'm furthering that credential, right? That this is all the same thing coming through in different ways to people in different circumstances. And it's just another piece of that in this place, this window of high strangeness in my backyard, metaphorically. It's about 15 minutes from my house. We heard the howl, and what we captured was someone whistling a tune. It's even more interesting because this happened shortly before we played Hell in the Wabash again, the second time. First time being with Keith, this time with Levi. Levi played it on his phone, actually. He's holding the recorder and his phone. We did have an EMF spike right before there, or right after, I'm not sure. I'd have to review. But it was very quick, and we never caught it again. And so it could have been just anything. It could have been the phone. It was not the flashlight. We did check that. We checked the phone, and it was a lot higher and a lot stronger than what had happened. That doesn't mean it didn't pick up the phone. They were pretty close together. His daughter had the K2 meter. So we play the sound, or we play the song, and shortly after that, we caught something else on the recorder that we did not hear with our own ears and our physical bodies. Let's take a listen to that clip. That sounds like the same whistling, maybe even copying Hell on the Wabash. That's really interesting. So we're dealing with something presenting itself at least as intelligent, or we could go to the stone tape theory where there's just someone who whistled there one time and the conditions were just right that it kind of locked it into the memory of the earth. You know, I'm not really sure. Can't explain it. Definitely sounds like someone whistling though. And we did not hear the whistling. Several minutes later, and this was what disturbed me and made me the most paranoid because I've never had this happen before. Again, I'm not a ghost hunter. This is not my forte, not my wheelhouse, not my monkeys, not my circus. I'll just play it. I don't know about you, but it sounds like a girl or a young woman saying my name. And that freaked me out a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I'm not scared of it. But it was interesting and definitely a little unsettling. And I'm going through all this evidence after the live stream that ended. This is probably close to midnight. I'm out in the studio in the dark by myself. And I'm starting to get a little paranoid now, right? And I look up from my desk over my monitor to the door of the studio, where there is a glass window, and I chalk it up to just being paranoid and my mind trying to make sense of things. But I swear to you, I saw about a 4-foot tall humanoid shape, black and gray scale, run past my neighbor's garage, which is just across the road. And I was like, okay, my mind's messing with me now. I'm gonna just stop doing what I'm doing, and I'm gonna go inside. And so I did, without incident. The next night, I came back out to the studio, and I was working with the audio again, separating it, making a separate file, cleaning it up a little bit. And I started getting that paranoid feeling again. And it's just from being out here alone and, you know, just listening to a disembodied voice say your name, I think. You know, that's what I'm chalking it up to. I started getting paranoid again, and so I decided, well, I'm going to close up. I'm going to go inside. To lock my studio door, you need to use the key from the outside of the door. So as I pull the key up to lock the studio door, I hear a whistle coming from what would be the northeast of me. And I froze, and I looked around to see if anybody was outside. I live in a pretty rural area. I have a couple of neighbors that are close by, but they're not typically outside late. And I didn't see anyone. There are street lights and things. There was no one outside. So I thought, all right, maybe I'm just hearing things now. I was seeing things last night. Now I'm hearing things. Or maybe something came back with me from the cemetery. Maybe it's the whistler. And I decided, well, I'm going to go ahead, lock up. I'm going in. And I cut through my garage. My studio is on the east side of my garage. My garage is on the east side of my house. So I go into the garage, lock the garage door behind me, the side garage door. I use the back to go in and out. And I'm standing in the back doorway of the garage. I'm on my phone, messaging one of my friends saying, yeah, we found this. And I just heard a whistle, and I heard it again, coming from the southeast. I looked around again, didn't see anybody, and I thought, I'm going to whistle back. So I whistled back, and it whistled back at me. And I pulled my phone out, and I wish I still had this. It was an Instagram thing, and it's gone. I recorded a video of me whistling, and it whistling back. And me whistling, and it whistling back. And so this happened multiple times. And I was like, I got to that point where I was just, it's just fascinating, but I'm not going to stand out here at like 1 a.m. and whistle at my neighborhood. People probably think I'm weird enough already. So I'm just going to go inside. So I just said good night, and I went inside. And nothing has happened since then. Maybe they just came for a visit. Or maybe it triggered something in this energy from the paranoia in my brain. I don't know. But I am fascinated to continue the work and I do plan on featuring more investigations to this place. I will not reveal the location, at least not yet. I don't want people traveling here and, angering the locals to a point where I'm not allowed to go there at night. So, I don't know. It's weird, right? These window areas, high strangeness. Had a good brush with it, I guess. So, I hope you have enjoyed this little monologue of mine and a little recap of my investigation to a window. We'll see you on the next one.
Until next time, keep the fire going.